Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
Tomorrow's Romance Dawn, Old Version, by OtakuWithHazelEyes. The Straw Hats have left Drum, ready to take on Baroque works in Alabasta. However, upon making a pit stop at a mystery island, they come across something they never expected to find: an older Zoro. Now they must locate the future crew, as well as keep treasure out of the hands of bounty hunters. Adios.
Nighttime on Kala was always disconcerting. The moon never stayed the same phase for more than a night, and the constellations were constantly changing their position. But if you lived there as long as Siobhan had, you got used it. After a while, she had come to love these disconcerting nights. Tonight, however, was not one of those nights. Tell me if it's true, child. The large man in front of her seemed to sneer and smirk at the same time. Is this actually the lost island of Kala? Siobhan looked around her cage. Was the cage really necessary? Silence, you brat, the man bellowed, waving his torch close to her face. You are in no position to ask questions, and I have no reason to answer you, though considering you bid me 5 times before my team got you away from me. Yes, the cage is necessary. Boss, the Mohawk lady snapped. You did the exact opposite of what you said you were going to do again. Arati, be quiet. Despite popular belief, I do have an idea as to what I'm doing. The boss snapped right back. He turned back to Siobhan. Listen girl, we're not going to hurt you. We just need you to cooperate with us until we meet our goal, after which we'll probably be forced to kill you though. We can't have you spreading the word about what we do here. Arati smacked him upside the head. You did it again. The boss shot the Mohawk lady a dirty look, daring her to try smacking him again. That's all on you guys, a man with red eyes piped up. I'm not killing a kid. That's fine, the boss said, rubbing his now bumpy head. I can handle her myself. Siobhan blew her bangs out of her face. She could not believe she let herself get captured by this moron. And her day had been going so well too. When 2 ships had gotten caught in the fog, she had been excitedly anticipating new visitors. How did it go so wrong? Sorry about our boss, the man with red eyes said, kneeling down to her eye level. He's actually not this stupid. He's just a little excited. He's been searching for this legendary island for a long time. It is true, a girl in somewhat goth Lolita clothing added. We had to put up with him talking about it when he hired us. Yari, there is no need to be rude, the boss scolded. He sighed at Siobhan, rubbing the bridge of his nose tiredly. Just answer me. Is this island's name Kala? Siobhan scowled. She didn't like these people, but she would not deny the name of this island. Yes, she muttered. This is Kala Island. The boss grinned, now less tired looking. Excellent. Now, at last after all these years the treasure of Kala will be mine. The world government will bow their heads in gratitude, and I will no longer hear my name ridiculed amongst marine ranks. Siobhan raised an eyebrow. World government? Marines? Some of her past visitors mentioned these things, but they never really went into detail. Someone has issues, a young man with a slightly feral appearance snickered. Runo, boss, as no one had said his name yet, Siobhan decided to call him that in her head, barked. Arati, Yari. Vaughn, gather up the men and start searching the island. We will find the treasure, no matter what the cost. Why do we have to search? Arati whined. Can't we just ask the kid? They all looked at Siobhan, who was whistling innocently in her cage. Want me to convince her? Runo said with a grin. She looks weak, but she could easily join the ranks of my new toys. Siobhan snarled. Those people are not toys, you sicko, let them go. Runo shrugged. Maybe I will. If you tell us where we can find what we're searching for. Siobhan looked away. Yeah, that's what I thought. Runo turned to Boss. Well, should I? It wouldn't do any good, Vaughn answered before Boss could. You were off collecting your toys when Arati and I faced her. Your devil fruit abilities won't have any more of an effect on her than mine did. Her will is too strong. Yari gave Siobhan a creepy smile. Aren't you an interesting little girl? Tell me, would you like to be one of my new dolls? What did I just say? Ignoring red-eyed Vaughn, Siobhan stuck out her tongue and pulled down one eyelid at Yari. That was as good a response as any. Enough, boss hollered. This girl is useless in many aspects, but we may need her in order to find our treasure if we can't do so ourselves. You do realize you're not going to get away this, right, boss? Siobhan said in a bland tone. There's a reason no one's found the treasure yet, and it's not just because this island is so damn hard to locate. I think I have a pretty good chance, boss said. Don't underestimate me, brat. While I think you're a moron, I don't doubt your skills. I can sense you're at least moderately strong, Siobhan clarified. You're going to fail because others are coming. Boss's eyes narrowed. Others? Yes, others. They will arrive at the island after the next daybreak. She closed her eyes. I can sense them, like I was able to sense you and the other people that arrived here today. Call it a gut feeling, but I doubt they'll let you do what you want. Do you know who it is? Arati asked curiously. Oh, just more of the same, Siobhan replied vaguely. The same, but also different. The group looked confused, except for Vaughn. A slow smile spread across his lips. It's like that, is it? Vaughn asked. This is going to be fun. Siobhan looked away, instead focusing her attention on Runo's toys, who were standing off to the side, absolutely still. I don't know about fun, but things will be getting interesting around here, she thought. Kala wouldn't reveal itself, much less for the more of the same, for no reason. It will all truly begin when the others arrive. Well, it's safe to say the Kestia's virus is officially out of your system, Nami, Chopper said, putting away his tools. You're 100% disease-free. That's a relief, Nami said, getting off Chopper's examination table. It was actually a table made of old crates. They would get a proper one later, thanks Chopper, you're a great doctor. Shut up. The little doctor stammered, wiggling happily. I didn't do anything, it was Doctorine's medicine that cured you. I just helped you through the final stages of your recovery. Don't think complimenting me will make me happy, moron. You look happy to me, Nami thought with a sweat drop. Oh well. She supposed this would just be one quirk about the crew's new doctor that she would have to get used to. Stretching her arms, Nami left the sick bay, actually just a spare room on the ship they decided to give to Chopper, with the little doctor in tow. They had left Drum Island only 2 days earlier. They still had a few more days before they arrived in Alabasta, so Nami wanted to be sure she was completely healthy now. She couldn't help Vivi if she was still sick, now could she? Nami opened the door leading out to the main deck. Guess what, everyone, your navigator is now 100% healthy. That's wonderful, Nami, Vivi said, clapping her hands together. She was sitting at the deck table, and Sanji had been setting down her morning drink. Nami Swan, Sanji sang, mellowing his way over to her. I'm so happy you've returned to complete health. I hope we never have to go through such a trial ever again. Sanji, stop dancing around, Chopper scolded him. Your back is still healing, you need to take it easy. The scolding would have had a much stronger effect if Chopper hadn't been hiding the wrong way behind the mast while saying it. Isn't that backwards? Sanji commented. Chopper's eyes widened a little, then he corrected himself so that just his eye was visible. Better, but I can still see you. Nami and Vivi shared a glance. It looked like Chopper was still nervous around Sanji. Not surprising, considering the chef had wanted to turn him into venison stew. Nami's completely better, Luffy piped up. He was currently riding around the deck on Karu's back, playing a version of tag with Usopp. Yosh, then let's set course for Alabasta. Qua, Karu added in agreement. We're already on course for Alabasta, you dummy, Usopp reminded him. And I don't see why you're so excited. Have you forgotten that a warlord is after us? Yeah, I know, Luffy said eagerly. I can't wait to see how strong he is. You may have a death wish, but I want live as long as physically possible. I'm only going to help Vivi stop the revolution, that's it. We'll leave all the crazy fighting to monsters like you and Zoro. Really, thanks, Usopp. Usopp, you don't have to worry about Crocodile, Nami huffed. He doesn't know what you, Sanji, or Chopper look like. In fact, the crew doesn't have to worry about him period, Sanji added. Thanks to my efforts on Little Garden, the Straw Hat Pirates are dead as far as Crocodile's concerned. Yeah, that'll last, a voice scoffed from the crow's nest. Shut up, Mosshead. I'm afraid Mr. Bushido's right, Sanji, Vivi said before the fight could take off. Mr. Zero didn't get this powerful by being a fool. It's only a matter of time before he figures out we're still alive. A bitter truth, but one the crew would have to accept. Underestimating a warlord was never a good idea if you plan to live a long life. After all, Zoro did just that and nearly got cut in half for his efforts. Chopper looked at his new crewmates, confused. What do you all mean? What's a crocodile have to do with anything? Who's Mr. Zero? It was then the crew realized they had yet to inform Chopper that the ship he joined held 4 people with hits out on them. Luffy had to constantly badger him to get him to fulfill his dream of being a pirate, and they didn't want to scare the little reindeer so early on his journey. Tony. Well, you see. Vivi began. Oi, Nami, Zoro shouted down from the crow's nest, thankfully saving the princess from an awkward explanation. What is it, Zoro? Nami called back. You said we're not supposed to be reaching Alabasta for several more days, right? Yeah, that's right. Why do you ask? Then what's that big island-shaped blotch in the distance off the port side? Nami's eyes widened, and she immediately ran for the port side of the Mary, grabbing the telescope Usopp held out as she ran past him. Once there, she peered through the eyeglass and sure enough, there was an island-shaped blotch in the distance. With the telescope, she could see that it was more than just a blotch, but an actual island covered in fog. That island wasn't there before, Nami stammered. She turned to Vivi. Vivi, are there supposed to any islands in this part of the Grand Line? Vivi shook her head. No, at least not according to maps I've seen. It's supposed to be just open sea. Then where did that island come from? Zoro asked, having jumped down from the crow's nest. How the heck should I know? Islands don't just appear out of nowhere. Nami checked her wrist log pose. The log isn't even pointing at it. Cool, Luffy exclaimed. A mystery island. Nami, let's go explore it. No way, Luffy, Usopp argued. We don't know what's on that island. It's unnatural. For all we know it could be haunted. A haunted island? Chopper echoed, having forgotten about his previous questions. I didn't know there were islands that were haunted. What are those like, Usopp? Usopp's demeanor instantly morphed from a cowardly one to a cocky one. They're islands where ghosts rule and the living dead walk free. I remember having conquered an entire chain of haunted islands, back when I was only 5 years old. Wow, really? Chopper and Luffy gasped in awe. If you conquered a chain of haunted islands when you were 5, then why are you so scared to go to one as a? Nami began. She paused. How old are you? Are you saying we've been traveling together for this long and you've never bothered to learn my age? The sniper hollered. Considering everything that's happened to us ever since we joined the crew, it never really came up, she admitted. I'm 17. Usopp hollered. So am I, Luffy added. I'm 19, if anyone's curious, Sanji spoke up. I'm 18, Nami sighed. I'm 16, Vivi said. I'm pretty sure I'm 15, Chopper said. Karoo quacked his response, but no one was really paying attention to him. Everyone was looking at Zoro. What? The swordsman asked. Everyone else said how old they are, Luffy explained. Now it's your turn. Zoro rolled his eyes. If it's that important to you, I'm 19 years old. Just like the love cook. Seriously? Vivi said in shock. I thought you were older than that. How old did you think I was? I thought you were 25, at least. 25? Zoro does have an older looking face, Nami noted. Shut up, woman, Zoro snapped. Wait, you're the same age as me? Sanji asked. When's your birthday? Didn't know you cared, cook. Just answer the question, Mosshead. November 11th. A smirk spread across the cook's face. Mine is March 2nd. The crew's jaws dropped. Zoro, the bulkier, taller, older-looking one of the two constant clashers, was actually the younger one? Zoro scowled. Shut up. Sanji's only continued to smirk. Is that any way to speak to your elders? I said shut up, Arrow Cook. Maybe I should have you start calling me Sanji-senpai. In your dreams, you curly freak, what did you just call me? The girl's sweat dropped as another Sanji-Zoro fight began. Anything will get those two in argument, huh? Vivi said with a sigh. I can only hope they'll grow out of it soon, Nami grumbled. This is getting old. Nami was so busy muttering that she didn't notice Zoro had suddenly stopped his arguing and had walked to the rail. "Hey, where are you going?" Didn't answer. He looked over the side of the boat, then at Nami. "Hey, Nami, did you alter our course at all?" "Of course not," Nami replied. Zoro frowned. "Then why have we suddenly picked up speed? And why are we suddenly sailing directly toward that mystery island?" At his words, everyone's heads snapped towards the front of the Mary. They were now heading directly toward the mystery island, and said island was now very, very close. "Oh no," Nami thought. "I was distracted by that stupid age discussion, and we've completely gone off course. Sanji, Chopper, take the helm. We need to make a 90-degree turn, now." Sanji gleefully agreed and ran into the galley, followed closely by Heavy Point Chopper. Nami tapped her foot impatiently, waiting for the lurch of a ship making a sudden turn. When nothing happened for several minutes, she lost her patience. "Sanji, Chopper, what's taking so long?" she hollered. Chopper stuck his head out of the doorway. "We're pushing as hard as we can, but the rudder won't budge." "Push the rudder harder, then. If we do that, it'll break," came Sanji's voice from within the galley. "It's just like when we're going up Reverse Mountain." "Are you kidding me?" Nami wailed. "How did we get stuck in a supercurrent?" "I did warn you about the unpredictability of the Grand Line," Vivi reminded her. Nami shot her a dirty look and Vivi decided now would be a good time to stay silent. She took a few steps back and sat down next to Karoo. "Looks like we're going to the Mystery Island after all," Luffy said happily, sitting down on his special seat. She, this going to be so much fun. Only you would call getting trapped in a freakishly strong current and being forced toward a haunted island fun, Luffy, Usopp said darkly. "You said that the living dead were on haunted islands, right?" the rubber captain asked. "Does that mean zombies?" "Luffy, what are you thinking?" Usopp asked worriedly. "Well, think about what it would be like to have a zombie on the crew. That would be so awesome." "We're not inviting a member of the living dead to join this crew," Nami screeched. "But what if he also just happens to be a musician?" Luffy offered. "We still need one, after all." "Fine Luffy," Zoro said, wanting to put this dumb conversation to an end. "If we find one of the undead who just happens to be a musician, we'll take him into consideration." "Yosh, thanks, Zoro." Sanji and Chopper, who was back in Brainpoint, stepped back out onto the deck. "Sorry Nami, I was unable to get the rudder to move without running the risk of breaking it in half," Sanji apologized. "Looks like we're going to that island whether we want to or not." "Dang it," Nami said through grit teeth. She turned to Vivi. "Sorry, Vivi. It appears we're making a slight detour." Vivi waved it off while stroking a nervous Karoo's feathers. "It's alright. It's not like you can control the currents. But look on the bright side. Maybe we'll be able to find some food supplies there." "Great thinking, my beautiful Vivi," Sanji swooned. "Unless it's overrun by ghosts and zombies," Chopper said fearfully, hiding once again the wrong way behind the mast. Nami made a mental note to smack Usopp later. He needed to find a filter for his stories. "One haunted island is no match for the great Captain Usopp," Usopp declared, though he was sweating profusely. "Bring it on." "I've never fought zombies before," Zoro commented. He grinned wickedly. "Sounds like it would be interesting." It was settled. For better or worse, the Straw Hat Pirates would be visiting the mystery and possibly haunted island. "We're about to enter the fog," Luffy announced from the Mary's figurehead. The Going Merry did just that, entering the thick fog surrounding the island. If an outsider had been watching, they would have seen the charming ship appear to be swallowed up by the fog, vanishing without so much as trace. Time. Undetermined location. Kala Siobhan picked at the small pile of fruit someone had shoved through the bars of her cage that morning. Well, at least they weren't trying to starve her or anything. "Now, if they would only let me out of this cage," she said to herself. Arati, Yari, Runo, Boss, and their men were off looking for the treasure. They'd left Vaughn on babysitting duty, and you didn't have to be a genius to see he wasn't entirely thrilled about it. Still, he was man enough to keep his emotions in check and was currently passing the time by cleaning his weapon. "So, how long do you plan to stay here?" Siobhan asked conversationally. "As long as necessary," Vaughn replied, not even bothering to look up at her. "If you're attempting small talk, you're not doing a very good job of it." "Can you blame me?" This cage is boring. Next time don't bite our boss 5 times. Siobhan stuck out her lip in a pouty way. That jerk deserved to get bitten, and she had a feeling Vaughn agreed with her on the issue. He was just sticking to his role as the hired help by not forming any opinions. All of a sudden, Siobhan felt a chill run down her spine. She involuntarily gasped, causing Vaughn to look at her. "Something wrong?" he asked. Siobhan shook off the chill and smiled. "Oh, nothing is wrong. Just a slight shiver down my spine. It's not anything you need to be concerned about." Vaughn's expression said he sincerely doubted that, but he didn't question her further and returned to his work. Once his eyes were away from her, Siobhan stood up and gazed in the direction she knew the beach was in. The others have entered the fog, she thought. Now, let's see if we'll be having some of the fun Blood Eyes was talking about. Time. Undetermined location. The fog. The Straw Hats stood on deck, letting the strong current guide their ship. One would suspect they'd be worried about all the thick fog around them, seeing as it meant they wouldn't be able to see any obstacles ahead of them or when they would crash against the shore. Surprisingly, they weren't worried. They were focused on the fog, mind you, but not in the way you would expect. It wasn't normal fog. Normal fog was dark and gray. This fog was dark and gray as well, but within it, there were occasional bursts of color. Blues, greens, and pinks swirled with the mist, lighting up the deck with each flash. It was a sight to behold. "So cool," Luffy said in a breathy tone, "rainbow fog." "It's beautiful," Vivi agreed. "I consider myself something of a weather expert, and I've never seen fog like this," Nami observed. Some of the fog near Usopp lit up, and, curious, he ran his hand through it. "Always been negative. Arg," Usopp squealed, stumbling backward. "Usopp," Chopper shouted, running to his crewmate's side. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "GGG ghost," Usopp stammered out. "I touched some of the lit-up fog and heard the voice of a ghost." "Seriously?" Chopper and Luffy gasped. "Is this another lie?" Sanji asked, lighting a cigarette. "If so, it's not funny." "I'm serious," Usopp insisted. "You try, if you don't believe me." There was no need, though. As they got deeper into the fog, the more frequent the bursts of color were. Soon, the colors enveloped the Going Merry entirely. "Does any else hear voices?" Zoro asked. "We're all touching the colors now," Vivi pointed out. "If Usopp's correct. This rainbow fog lets us hear ghosts?" Luffy asked. "That's amazing. I bet ghosts have some cool things to say. Let's listen." That suggestion was so unlike Luffy, the crew actually followed it. As the ship sailed further, the voices got louder, but there were parts here and there they couldn't decipher. At first, the voices were condescending and grated on the crew's nerves. "You're weak and you have no pride. Except for your immunity to lightning, you're nothing more than a powerless. And let the desert sands bury you." Sanji reacted to that last one. "I know that voice. That's the man I talked to on the transponder snail on Little Garden, Mr. Zero." "Crocodile's a ghost already," Luffy said. "He froit. How can I fight him if he's a ghost?" "I'm pretty sure Crocodile's not a ghost," Vivi assured him. "Guys, I don't think it's ghosts we're hearing." The voices continued to become more loud and, well, vocal. But at least their tones were changing, even if they didn't make any sense. "Wouldn't let me die. I'm a romantic, just like. What's the point of having power if? One hell of a roll this week. Although I have no stomach. You promised that. Even if someone was shot before your eyes." Nami gasped. "Hatchin? Who's Hatchin?" Sanji asked. "He was that octopus swordsman in Arlong's crew. Zoro beat him, I think." "I remember him," Zoro nodded. "I'm pretty sure I didn't kill him, so we wouldn't be hearing his voice if these really are ghosts." Vivi's right, these voices are something else. The voices intensified and started to become more familiar. "Existing is not a crime. Good boy, Laboon. Want to live? Take me with you." Vivi frowned. That voice sounded awfully familiar, but at the same time, incredibly sad. "What makes you God?" Luffy startled slightly. That was his voice. "Be a more reliable man." Chopper shivered. What was his voice? "Flighty. What about how others feel?" That sounded like me, Nami shouted. "Born to love ladies, not be friends with." Sanji breathed hard on his cigarette. What was going on? This place isn't hell. Usopp couldn't help but think how odd his voice sounded. Was it possible to sound so brave and so afraid at the same time? Can't even protect my captain, then my ambition is. Zoro gripped one of his sword's hilts. What was his voice saying about not protecting his captain? This was wrong. Why were they hearing their own voices in the fog, saying things that didn't make sense? It was creepy and they wanted it to stop. Worried about his bumbling kid brother. Another voice broke in. It was a new one. The voice was warm and sounded light-hearted as opposed to the previous serious tones they had been hearing. It was a pleasant switch and stood out amongst all the other voices speaking. Luffy's eyes widened. He knew that voice. What was it doing in the mystery fog? The top, you and me. Ace? Luffy asked aloud. Is that you? Ace. Zoro repeated. Who's Ace? Luffy didn't answer. He kept listening. No right to interfere. You never change. This era is. Can't even let you save. Luffy frowned. Ace's tone had changed. It sounded strong, and yet weak. A word he had never associated with his brother. It was almost as if it sounded like Ace was giving up. It good I was born. All I wanted. The Straw Hats were all frowning now. Save for Luffy, they didn't know who was speaking, but what kind of person asked if it was good they had been born? Luffy was getting anxious. Just what was Ace's voice saying? So worthless. Even though I carry the blood of a demon. Luffy leaned forward on his special seat. Thank you. The voice choked, as if he were on his last legs. Fore. The fog suddenly cleared, and all the voices immediately faded away. The sun shone brightly and the sky was a magnificent shade of blue. Not that the crew could appreciate it, due to their captain's yelling. The moment the voices vanished, Luffy had jumped to his feet, narrowly avoiding stumbling off the Mary's figurehead. Thank you for what? Come on, Ace. What we're going to say? Who are you thanking? Ace, answer me, damn it, Ace. Luffy. Sanji called out. What? Luffy shouted back. His face looked a little scary. Sanji flinched, before pointing ahead. We've arrived. Luffy turned and saw that the current had stopped pushing the ship only a few feet in the water away from the island. Now that the fog was gone, he could see it clearly. It had a large beach with pink-colored sand, and big strange trees that looked like the jungle back on Dawn Island. The boy's face broke into a big grin. Whoa, pink sand? And look at the size of those trees, Luffy exclaimed. He turned to his crew. Hey Chopper, Usopp, let's see if we can climb one. I think I saw some coconuts on one of them. We could. What are you guys all staring at? The crew was staring in the opposite direction of the strange beach, towards the fog. Though they had literally just left it, the fog was at least a full kilometer away now. How'd it get so far away so quickly? Usopp said, incredulous. We were completely surrounded by it only a second ago. With the mystery island, super current, colored fog, and disembodied voices that sound like us, nothing surprises me at this point. Nami groaned in defeat. Let's just pack some supplies and leave before we all go completely insane. Yeah, let's find some meat. Luffy agreed. Meet on the mystery island. Right away, Nami Swan, Sanji added. With that, they had Zoro lower the anchor and prepared to set foot on the mystery island. Luffy decided to slingshot himself across the stretch of water by stretching his arms ahead and getting a grip on one of the thick trees. Gum gum. Luffy began, stretching backward, rocket. He lifted his feet and went flying straight into the same tree he had been holding. Of course, being a rubber man, he barely even felt the impact. That left the others to either jump off the boat and onto the beach. Sanji and Zoro, with some glaring, wade through the water. Nami and Usopp, despite Sanji's offers to carry the former, or swim across while riding on Karu's back. Vivi and Chopper. I can't believe it, Chopper said excitedly. My first new island as a pirate. Vivi smiled at him. I'm glad to see you're excited, Tony. You've been pretty nervous these last couple days. I'm still getting used to leaving Drum, that's all, he replied as they arrived at the beach, and he and Vivi dismounted the large duck. But I promise to do my best for the crew here. Vivi chuckled as they walked over to join the others. I'm sure you will. The beach was even more beautiful up close. The pink sand sparkled under the sunlight, before becoming thick green grass as it got into the jungle area. The trees were unnaturally large, and their leaves also seemed to glitter if the sunlight caught them just right. Luffy ran around the beach, laughing loudly. The sand here is pink, shi. The mystery island has mystery sand. That's great, Luffy, Usopp said. Luffy? Can we ask you something really quick? Luffy stopped running. Oh, sure, what do you need? You were getting pretty upset back there with that last voice, Zoro pointed out. If you don't mind us asking, who's Ace? Nami asked. Oh, is that all? Luffy asked. He grinned. Ace is my big brother. The quiet that followed was stifling. You could have heard a pin drop. Brother? The crew finally gasped after a few silent moments. Luffy has a brother? Usopp shouted in shock. There's actually a living flesh and blood person born before and related to Luffy? Nami added. Luffy's a monster already. Just imagine what his big brother would be like, Sanji realized. Sanji, Vivi scolded. I wish I had a brother, Chopper said softly. So that was your brother's voice we were hearing at the end? Zoro asked, not nearly as shaken up as the others. Luffy nodded. That was Ace. I haven't seen him since he left home to become a pirate, but I'd know his voice anywhere. Zoro was slightly tempted to ask what his brother might have meant, talking about whether him being born was good or not. He decided against it. It wasn't any of his business, and if Luffy felt like sharing, he would have already done so. He's a pirate too? Yeah, he left home 3 years before I did to look for the One Piece. If that was your brother's voice, then I can see why you were upset, Vivi said. The things he was saying were very unnerving. You must be worried. Nah, Ace is strong, Luffy said, shaking his head. I fought him all the time when we were kids and he always kicked my butt. Fruit powers. He can handle himself, and besides, that wasn't Ace. It was just something with his voice. That mystery fog was copying all of us, even Crocodile and that octopus guy. While they were shocked that there was also now a flesh and blood person who could defeat Luffy, they all considered what Luffy said about the fog. They hadn't imagined their own voices speaking within the fog, nor did they imagine Crocodile's. Had it all been one strange illusion though? I don't care anymore. Nami sighed at last. Let's break off into groups to look for food. Luffy, Zoro, Usopp, and I will remain here at the main beach to pick some of these coconuts. Sanji, Vivi, Karoo, and Chopper, you all go a little deeper into the woods and look, but don't go too far. We still don't know what's out there. But I want to explore the forest, Luffy whined. You're staying here, I'll go with him if he wants to explore, Zoro offered. That's even worse. Vivi rolled her eyes, but she was smiling, as if thinking, there they go again. She hopped on Karoo. Chopper morphed into Walk Point, and Sanji ran to the princess's side holding 3 large baskets. Then all 3 entered the jungle. Though they stuck to Nami's advice and didn't go too far in, it was obvious navigating the thick expanse of trees was not going to be an easy time. There were almost no paths and the trees' roots all seemed to get tangled up in each other. I've never seen trees this big before, Vivi said. They're even bigger than the ones on Little Garden. Wonder if this island has an incredibly ironic name too, Sanji said dryly. That made Vivi giggle, and that in turn made Sanji elated. Little Garden? Chopper asked, looking up at his 2 crewmates. Another story for another day, Tony, Vivi replied. Let's focus on finding supplies. We need to leave this island as soon as possible. Sanji gave Vivi a sympathetic look when she turned away. She wasn't happy about the detour, and that was understandable. Her country was on the brink of civil war and they had let their ship get caught in a freakishly forceful current. He knew Nami was already contemplating ways to make it up to her, and now so was he. Maybe she had a preferred meal she would want him to make. Hey, fruit trees, Chopper announced. Ahead of them were indeed multiple normal-sized fruit trees, each one bearing a different kind of fruit. Jackpot, Sanji said. Look at all this. Once Vivi dismounted Karoo again and Chopper went into Brain Point, the 3 pirates jogged over to the trees with their baskets. There was an apple tree, an orange tree, a peach tree, a mango tree, and even a banana tree. Some fruits didn't even look like they were supposed to be growing in the same climate, but here they were. This is amazing, Vivi said, picking a peach, and it's ripe too. They're all ripe, Chopper noticed. He was in Heavy Point in order to reach the fruit. That's a little strange. I know Grand Line Islands usually have one dominant season, but is this normal? Sanji asked. Vivi shook her head. Islands will have one dominant season, but they still technically have the others. Even so, this place feels like a spring or summer island. Most fruits don't get ripe until the fall. You're so knowledgeable, Vivi dear, Sanji praised. Though it seems to me somebody forgot to tell the fruit here that. While the three pirates, or two pirates and one princess, were discussing the ripening cycles of Grand Line fruit, Karoo was walking around, looking for fallen fruit. There were an odd number of leaves and branches on the ground, though the ones above were still green, so he prodded the jungle floor with his bill a few times to see if any fruits were hiding. It wasn't long before he had wandered away from the group entirely. He wasn't too worried though, he could still hear the others' voices, so he would be able to find his way back. He might as well help his princess and look for other food sources or a stream for fresh water. He waddled along, looking up at the massive trees. Maybe one of these bigger ones had something to eat. Karoo froze. Did the ground beneath his feet just groan? He slowly glanced down. Quaw! Vivi dropped her basket of fruit. That sounded like Karoo. Sanji glanced from side to side. Dang it, where did that stupid duck go? Karoo isn't stupid, I'm sorry Vivi, I didn't. It came from over there, Chopper said, pointing in the direction of Karoo's squawks. The trio abandoned their baskets and ran in the direction Chopper referred to. As they moved forward, Karoo's quacking got louder and more frantic. What's he saying, Tony? Vivi asked. He's too worked up, I can't make everything out, Chopper replied. But he's yelling about a person, and something about wounds. You're kidding me, Sanji said. There are people actually living here on this island? As they approached Karoo's location, Sanji took notice of something. There was blood on the ground, trailing in the same direction they were going. He didn't like the looks of this. They finally reached the spotted duck, who was pacing anxiously in front of someone lying face down on the ground. Whoever it was, there was pool of blood in the process of drying coming from his shoulder and head. Whoever he was, he'd been there a while. Vivi's hands flew to her mouth. Oh no, blood, Chopper shrieked. A doctor, we need a doctor. Tony, you're the doctor, oh, right. Vivi immediately went to calm Karoo down, stroking his bill. Chopper pulled off his pack and went to examine the man lying on the ground. Sanji, on the other hand, stayed back and gave the injured man a once-over, despite not being able to see his face. The stranger was wearing a long dark green coat, a red sash around his waist, and black pants that were tucked into a pair of boots. He was also wearing a dark bandana over his hair, 3 gold earrings on one of his ears, and had at some point shrugged off the top part of his coat to reveal he wasn't wearing a shirt. The only type of upper covering he wore was a green haramaki around his waist. Sanji's eyebrow twitched. That haramaki looked awfully familiar. He has a deep stab wound in his shoulder, but it's not as bad as it looks, Chopper examined, though he sounded nervous. But I can't get a good look at his forehead. Sanji, can you help me flip him over? Gently, that is. Sanji nodded and moved to the other side of the fallen man. Now he could see why Chopper was nervous. The man had a sword with a black and red blade gripped in his left hand. Chopper carefully slipped the sword away, and the stranger didn't so much as twitch. Sanji knelt down, and on the count of 3, the cook and the reindeer moved the stranger onto his back while the latter at the same time removed his bandana. The reaction was almost instantaneous. What the? Chopper gasped. Sanji's cigarette fell from his mouth. There's 2 of them? Vivi's eyes widened. How is this possible? There were a few minor differences that stood out, but there was no mistaking it. They were looking into the unconscious face of Roronoa Zoro. Zoro did not like this island. Just standing on the beach gave him an antsy feeling he couldn't shake off, and he wanted to leave it as soon as possible. After the love cook, princess, reindeer, and Karoo went off into the woods, he actually listened to Nami when she barked at him, Luffy, and Usopp to start collecting coconuts. At this point, he'd take any excuse to get his mind off the odd vibes the island gave off. Now that he thought about it, that uneasy feeling most likely started back in the rainbow fog. He'd heard his own voice say he couldn't protect his captain. Why would Luffy need protecting? Luffy was one of the strongest people he knew, and could do more than hold himself in a fight. The day Luffy would need protecting would be a dire one indeed. Even if Luffy needed to be protected, why would he fail? Hadn't he promised Luffy he'd never lose again? Zoro shook his head and threw another coconut down to Usopp. He needed to stop worrying about it. The stupid fog was just mimicking his voice, and he wasn't going to waste time trying to figure out how it did that. It was just another weird Grand Line occurrence he had to accept, trying to get inside his head. He'd never fail in protecting anyone on this crew. And as for the antsy, uneasy feeling, well, he'd just have to remain ready for a fight at any time. That was usually where all these kinds feelings led to, anyway. Ow! He heard Usopp squeak. Zoro, watch where you're dropping those coconuts. Zoro looked down to see a large lump forming on the sniper's head. Whoops. My bad. If you're going to apologize, then at least try to sound sorry, jerk. Zoro jumped down from the tree, swords clinking against each other. Whatever, did we collect enough coconuts to please the witch yet? I heard that. Nami hollered from farther down the beach. We would have enough. Usopp said, glancing at the measly pile of coconuts at his feet. He turned on his heel to glare at his captain. If someone would stop eating them all. Luffy looked up from the rock he was balancing a coconut on, ready to crush it with another rock. Huh? You talking to me, Usopp? Luffy, stop eating our supplies. Zoro shouted. We need them for the trip to Alabasta. But I'm hungry. You're always hungry. Maybe if someone would find me some Mystery Island meat, I wouldn't be eating the coconuts. Why you? That's enough, Nami ordered, rejoining the boys. Honestly, I could hear you guys from the other side of the beach. Stop yelling like children and get back to work. If you want it done so badly, why don't you help? Usopp grumbled. Because that would require her doing actual work, Zoro thought bitterly. Nami flipped her hair. I'm surveying the land, of course. We need to remain vigilant on a mystery island. She turned to look at the jungle. Part of me wishes we weren't in such a hurry to leave, though. If I had time, I would love to perform a thorough survey and make a map. Luffy had grown bored with coconuts and was now kicking pink sand around. If you want to make a map, we could stay a little longer. I still want to explore the jungle. We can't, Luffy, Nami sighed. We're on a schedule. I don't want to delay our arrival in Alabasta any more than I have to, so if that means not making one map, I can live with it. Besides, Luffy, I don't want to be here when the zombies show up, Usopp added fearfully. Why? If we're not here when they do show up, how am I going to find my musician? We are not getting a zombie to join this crew. Oh, for the love of Usopp. Enough with the zombie talk already. Nami snapped. We don't know if this is a haunted island or not, so stop all your ow. Nami's rant was thankfully brought to an abrupt end from something small and hard flying into her head. Ow. Nami groaned, rubbing the sore spot. She turned to face Luffy. Luffy, why did you throw a rock at me? Luffy shook his head furiously. I didn't throw a rock, I was just kicking the sand around and my foot hit something. I didn't mean to make it fly into your head. Zoro knelt down, picking up the projectile that hit their navigator. Also, this isn't a rock. Come have a look. The other three gathered around their swordsman, examining what he held in his hand. It looked similar to Nami's wooden log pose, only the base was bigger and flatter, and instead of a large glass ball holding the needle, it was three smaller balls holding three separate needles. A log pose? Usopp questioned. I think so, Zoro replied. Though why a log pose would need three needles is beyond me. Maybe it's to find more islands, Luffy suggested. Each needle points to a different one, and you can choose which way you want to go. Nami took the triple pose, she supposed, and compared it with her own. She frowned, for all four needles were all spinning without any sign of locking onto something. It's almost as if there's nothing to lock onto, she said, mostly to herself. Huh? Did you say something, Nami? Luffy asked. Before Nami could reply, she was interrupted. Oi, Nami, Luffy. Nami stuffed the triple pose into her pocket, and turned with the others to look towards the direction the shout had come. What they saw was Sanji, Vivi, Chopper, and Karoo exiting the jungle. Hey, Sanji, Luffy called. You're back? Find anything cool in there? Depends on what you think is cool, Sanji replied vaguely. Zoro noticed the only one holding any fruit was Chopper. What's the deal, Cook? You guys were gone for that long and only come back with one basket of food? I thought you'd want to impress Nami or something. What's wrong with wanting to impress me? Nami demanded. The four leaving the jungle stopped walking and stared at Zoro, as if they couldn't believe that he was standing there. Then, almost simultaneously, they all glanced at Karoo. "Hey, who's that on Karoo's back?" Usopp asked suddenly. They couldn't see very well from the angle the others were at, but there was definitely someone slumped over in Karoo's saddle. "Wait, did you guys actually find someone on this island?" Nami asked. "That's great, maybe now we can finally learn where the heck we are." Sanji and the others said nothing. They just kept those anxious and disturbed expressions on their faces. "Hey, what's with those faces?" Luffy asked. "You guys look like you saw something really weird." "Oh, what is it, the zombies? Please tell me you found the zombies." "No, we didn't find any zombies," Chopper replied. "What we found is much weirder." "What's weirder than zombies?" Zoro narrowed his eyes. The uneasy feeling was coming back in full force. Mr. Bushido," Vivi spoke up. "You wouldn't happen to have an older brother who looks eerily like you and also carries 3 swords, do you?" "That's an awfully specific question," Zoro said, raising an eyebrow. "No, I don't. Why do you ask?" Vivi bit her lip. "You should probably see for yourself." Vivi and her group walked over to their friends, then moved out of the way so they could see who was lying in Karoo's saddle more clearly. It appeared to be an unconscious man wearing a long green coat, and he did have 3 swords sheathed into his sash, 2 of which looked very familiar, and that was when they saw his face. "Holy crap!" Usopp hollered. Nami's jaw dropped. There was just no way. Zoro's eyes widened to the size of plates, and it was safe to say he was thoroughly freaked out. This was his face he was looking at. His own face was also the face of a stranger. Why did some stranger the cook found in the woods have his face? Luffy smiled. "Oh, hey Zoro. When did you go into the woods with Chopper and the others?" "I'm right next to you, moron," Zoro snapped. Luffy looked from the Zoro standing next to him to the Zoro lying on Karoo. Judging from his expression, his brain was going into overload trying to figure this out. How could there be 2 of Zoro? Nami turned to the others. "Care to explain what the heck all of this is? Who is this guy? Why does he have that face?" "That face? My face. Just what the hell is going on?" At Zoro's shouts, Chopper hid behind Vivi. "We found him in the jungle. His shoulder and head were injured. He's lost a lot of blood. I couldn't just leave him there. And to be fair, we thought he was you," Vivi added. "I patched him as well as I could back in the jungle, but he needs stitches for his shoulder," Chopper continued, his voice less timid. "I didn't have the right materials, so I told Sanji and Vivi to carry him back to the Mary. Is that okay?" To Zoro, it was not okay. This was not natural, and he didn't want whoever this guy was on the ship. Luffy, however, had other ideas. "Of course it's okay, Chopper," Luffy said. "Do whatever had to do." "Thanks Luffy," Chopper said in relief. He turned to the duck. "Come on, Karoo. You can help me get him to the sick bay." Karoo quacked in response and followed the doctor towards the Mary. As soon as they were gone, Zoro turned to glare at his captain. "What is wrong with you?" Zoro barked. "You can't just let Chopper take that guy aboard the Mary. We don't know who or what he is." "Chopper's a doctor," Luffy said simply, crossing his arms. "I'm not going to tell him he can't treat someone. That doesn't change the fact we can't trust him." "Why not? I think he has a pretty trustworthy face." "That's because it's Zoro's face, idiot," Usopp said, whacking Luffy upside the head. "How about we go back to the Mary before we finish the discussion?" Sanji sighed, running a hand tiredly through his hair. "I don't like talking about this out in the open." Sanji had a point. There was an ominous weight hanging the air that no one liked the feel of. It was decided they would return to the Going Merry, for now. "Start from the beginning," Zoro ground out. "How exactly did you find this guy?" The crew was standing on the deck of the Mary, waiting for Chopper to finish stitching up Zoro's double. Said crew could understand Zoro's agitated attitude, though. It wasn't every day you found someone that was wearing the same face as you. Anyone would have found it unnerving. "We were picking fruit when Karoo started up this panicky squawking," Sanji said, lighting yet another smoke. "We went to check on him and found him pacing in front of Mosshead II. He was lying face down on the ground, sword drawn and bleeding out. He must have been in some sort of fight before we got there." "That does sound like something that would happen to Zoro," Usopp said with a nod. "Shut up," Longnose, Zoro yelled. That guy is not me. I never said he was. Usopp yelled back. And don't make fun of my nose. I got this nose from my mother. Enough you two. Nami shouted. Yelling at each other isn't going to fix anything. Sanji, please continue. Of course, Nami my love, Sanji cooed before getting serious again. Anyway, Chopper immediately got to work tending to his wounds. This left me and Vivi to try and figure how Zoro could be in the woods when we saw him not 20 minutes ago on the beach. He breathed out some smoke. Seeing as Zoro's standing only a couple feet away from me, either that man in the sick bay is just a lookalike or Mosshead also has an older brother he never told us about. I said I don't have an older brother, Swirls, Zoro argued. He paused. Why do you keep saying, older brother? I'd be saying he was your twin or something, Usopp added. He struck a dramatic pose. Long-lost twins, separated at birth by circumstances they could not control. Cool, Luffy cheered. Shut up, I don't have a twin either, Zoro yelled. He looked at Vivi. Why did you think he was my older brother? This guy does look almost exactly like you, Vivi explained. But his features are more mature. I'd say this man is a year or two older than you, if not more. Ah, Luffy sighed. Guess that means he's not Zoro's long-lost twin. Why are you disappointed about that? Zoro asked, sweat dropping. Twins are cool. If you say so. Sanji, I don't think the other Mr. Bushido is our Mr. Bushido's brother. Vivi went on. Brothers look alike, but they usually don't have the same scars on their chests. Oh yeah, that's right, Sanji remembered. Other Zoro did have the same scar on his chest as Zoro. Zoro's hand floated up to his chest. It was bad enough the other Zo the lookalike had his face, but his marks of pride as well? It's not just the one of his chest, Chopper added, coming out of the door that led to the galley. Hey, Chopper. Luffy greeted. How's other Zoro doing? When did we start calling him, other Zoro, Usopp wondered. Chopper wiped some sweat off his brow. As I thought, the wound on his shoulder wasn't nearly as bad as it seemed. I disinfected the wound and stitched it closed, and I have him set up on a mattress on the floor in the galley. I hope you don't mind, Sanji. I didn't feel comfortable giving him stitches on those crates we're using as my examination table. Sanji waved it off. It's alright. Just clean everything up when you move him again. Now, you were saying something about his scars? Oh right. As I was saying, other Zoro doesn't just have the same chest scar as our Zoro. I took off his boots before I laid him out on the mattress, and do you know what I saw? Other Zoro has the same scars around his ankles as Zoro. Chopper had first seen Zoro's ankle scars the previous day, spotting them after the latter kicked off his boots to train. When he asked Nami, she simply said they were from Zoro being stupid and not to worry about it. Chopper ended up examining them anyway. Seriously? Luffy asked. Does this mean other Zoro tried to cut his feet off too? Zoro got those scars from trying to cut off his feet? Chopper gasped. He collected himself. Ahem. The other Zoro's ankle scars were at least a few years old, but they were completely identical. Okay, this is getting kind of creepy, Nami said, hugging her arms. I know there's a saying about how there's somebody out there who looks just like you, but I don't think they're supposed to be that similar. Tell me about it, Sanji said, exhaling smoke. One sword freak is bad enough. I don't think the world could handle two of him. Zoro no longer looked agitated, even with the fuel of Sanji's remark. Instead, he appeared to be thoughtful. Nami was right for once about how strange this was. No two people were that similar. Scars were like fingerprints. You could never find two identical ones. If this other Zoro really did have all the same scars as himself, only older, on top of the fact he looked exactly like him, could it be possible that? Zoro sighed internally. Well, this was the grand line. He'd bet money that they would run into much weirder before their journey was through. Still, he needed see one thing before he was convinced. Chopper, is my look-alike ready to receive visitors? Everyone on deck turned to look at the swordsman, surprised by his sudden change in attitude and even more so that he actually wanted to see other Zoro. I guess so, Chopper replied. Why? I have a guess as to where he came from, Zoro explained, getting up from the barrel he was sitting on. But I need to check something to be sure. You're going to look at other Zoro's swords, right? Luffy asked. Zoro simply raised his eyebrow while the others, except Chopper, who didn't know this was unlike Luffy yet, gawked at their captain's perceptiveness. Two of them looked kind of like yours. Luffy went on. You want to go in and check them out, don't you? Zoro smirked. Guess I can't keep anything from you, can I, Captain? You okay with it? Luffy grinned. Sure, but only if the rest of us get to come in too. Is that okay with you? Zoro nodded and said it was, because he knew that even if he said no, Luffy would go ahead and do it anyway. He was just as interested in the mystery behind the other Zoro, for lack of a better thing to call him, as the rest of the crew. Once they got the okay from Chopper, the crew filed into the galley. It was just as Chopper said. The doctor had Pooh up against the wall, and the other Zoro was laid on a mattress in the middle of the floor with a blanket over him. His shoulder and part of his chest were bandaged, as well as the wound on his forehead. Chopper had removed his coat and sash, folded them neatly, and placed them on the table. His boots and bandana were resting on top of his coat, and the doctor had lined the other Zoro's swords carefully in a row on the table next to his clothes. Chopper immediately knelt down and started examining his patient again, starting by listening to his heart with a stethoscope. One could never be too careful. Meanwhile, this was the first time the crew, aside from the members who found him, were getting a good look at the other Zoro. Up close, they could see the striking similarities, but also the differences. Other Zoro had even bigger muscles than their Zoro, if that was possible, as well as a slightly thicker neck. His mossy hair was also a little longer and partially slicked back. Besides the massive one stretching from his left shoulder to his right hip, his body, the parts visible from beneath the blanket, was a patchwork of other thin scars running along each other. And speaking of scars, other Zoro had a thin one running down his left eye, as if he had been sliced there. Which, knowing their own Zoro, was probably the case. It was as Vivi said. Other Zoro looked like their Zoro, but a few years older. I can see why you all thought he was Zoro's older brother, Usopp admitted. The likeness is almost uncanny. Usopp could imagine that if they put Zoro through some magic aging machine, other Zoro would most likely be the end product. Sanji leaned over, glancing at the other Zoro's eye scar. What's up with his eye? I noticed the scar earlier. Chopper looked up briefly. I took a look at it when I was treating his head. Other Zoro is blind in his left eye. For some reason, that new information made something twist in Sanji's stomach, though he wasn't sure why. At the same time, Luffy also gained an unreadable, blank look in his eyes at Chopper's words as he looked upon his swordsman's double. Zoro rolled his own eyes. Now he was doubting his theory, like he would ever be stupid enough to let something happen to his eye. Becoming the world's greatest swordsman would be hard enough without throwing a lack of depth perception into the mix. Then again, even he couldn't control the outcome of a battle, and he doubted his look-alike was any different. Nami walked over to the table and inspected other Zoro's clothes. Well, it looks like this man doesn't share all of the same disastrous fashion tastes as Zoro. This coat is actually kind of nice. Vivi also walked over to the table, but not to look at other Zoro's clothes. Her focus was on the small stack of clear vials lying on the table. Each vial had a thin needle sticking out of it. She picked one up. What are these? Syringes? Luffy also looked. They look like darts to me. Usopp picked one up and lowered one of his goggles lenses, examining it. You're both right, actually. These are tranquilizer darts. Tranquilizer darts? The princess repeated. She frowned. Nasty. You recognize them, Usopp? Luffy asked. Yeah. You can load these kind into a gun and fire them at rampaging animals or even people. They hold a liquid that can make you pass out if it gets injected into your bloodstream. Wow, Usopp, Chopper said. You sure know a lot. I only recognize them because Doctorine sometimes used them on her more unruly patients. Dr. Hirulik used them as well, but Chopper didn't feel like explaining that at the moment. I don't doubt that, Sanji said, wincing as he rubbed the small of his back. Well, of course, Usopp said proudly to the little doctor. What kind of sniper would the great Captain Usopp be if I didn't know my way around different kinds of ammunition? You're a captain, Usopp? Chopper gasped. That's amazing. Wait, I thought Luffy was the captain. I am, Luffy replied. But before he joined our crew, Usopp was captain of the Usopp Pirates. Right, Usopp? Right, Usopp nodded. Chopper's eyes sparkled in admiration. "Why do you have trank darts, Chopper?" Zoro asked. Chopper stopped sparkling and gestured to other Zoro. "I pulled them out of his body. He's lucky, though. If anyone else had taken that much tranquilizer into their body, their heart would have stopped." "Zoro could have died," Luffy hollered. Karoo quacked worriedly also. "Other Zoros not our Zoro, moron," Nami yelled at him. "Quiet. He needs to rest," Chopper scolded them. "You'll wake him." "Please," Sanji scoffed. "He's hopped up on tranquilizers and, if he's anything like our moss head, it'll take nothing short of charging marines carrying booze to wake him up. However, that's not the problem here." "It's not? No, it's not. Other Mosshead had his sword drawn when we found him, and his bandana was over his head. If he's like Mosshead in personality as well as looks, he would only do that in a serious fight." Zoro was actually slightly impressed that Sanji noticed that about him. Now that he would ever say that out loud, of course. Sanji took a drag. "Now if you throw tranquilizer darts into the situation." A silence fell over the room. "There's someone on that island," Zoro said, most likely speaking for everyone. "Someone who felt he needed to take my counterpart down at any cost. Who's to say they won't come after us next?" Nami and Usopp shrieked in fear. Vivi frowned worriedly, and Luffy looked interested at the prospect of a fight. If Sanji had a problem with Zoro interrupting him, he wasn't saying anything. Zoro made his way to the table, deciding now would be a good time to study his double swords. First, the red-sheathed one. He picked it up and removed it from its sheath, seeing the familiar flame-like patterns down its blade. The immediate surge of bloodlust and anger that radiated from the sword proved it to be Sandai Kitetsu. Zoro could feel its dissatisfaction, as if it were wondering why such weak hands dared to wield it. Zoro glared at the blade, slid it back into the sheath, and set it down. Next, the black-sheathed one. Zoro knew immediately it was not Yubashiri. The sheath of this sword was black like Yubashiri's, but this one had red dots running down it instead of gold decorations. Wrapped around the upper part of the sheath was a Sagio rope, and the Tsuba was shaped like a flower instead of Yubashiri's cross-like one. He drew it, and his hand did an involuntary dip. This sword was much heavier than Yubashiri. Still, Zoro had to admire the craftsmanship of the red and black patterned blade. This was a nice sword, one he wouldn't mind using if he ever decided to move from Santoryu to Yontoryu. Back in its sheath and on the table it went. Lastly, the white-sheathed one. Zoro didn't have to unsheath it, hold it, or even look at it all that closely. He'd had this sword since he was a child and he recognized it instantly. This white sword was Kuina's sword, no mistaking it. His hand went to the white sword at his own hip, and he glanced at other Zoro. "So," Luffy piped up, "anything to say about the swords?" It was then Zoro finally noticed the crew had been watching him the entire time he had been inspecting his doubles weapons. For a few moments while he had been inspecting though, they had decided to worry about one problem at a time, so the possibility of an enemy being on the island was pushed into a corner for now. They'd focus on the situation at hand first. "Yeah," Zoro sighed, rubbing his neck tiredly. "I've never seen the black one before, but the other two are definitely mine." "You sure? Positive? Alright then, guess that's that." "They can't be the same swords," Nami argued. "It's just not possible. Maybe they're duplicates too, or—" "Nami, shut up," Zoro said a stern, calm tone. Nami obliged, surprisingly. Zoro slid his own swords out of his haramaki and held them up. "This red-sheathed sword is Sandai Kitetsu, and the white one is Wado Ichimonji. Every sword these two is completely unique. Especially these two. You can't just create counterfeits. It's not possible." He put Kitetsu back, but held Wado a little higher. "I've had this one since I was a little kid. I know it anywhere, and the one on the table is the same sword. I'd bet my life on it." Of course, the declaration only made everything more confusing as opposed to clearing everything up. Two of Zoro's swords. What was next? A duplicate of the Going Merry sailing up next to them. If they're the same swords, it doesn't explain how two of them can exist at the same time, Vivi said. Just who is other Mr. Bushido? "I actually have a theory about that," Zoro said. "I wanted to look at his swords to prove it, and this just did. This guy. Is you, isn't he? Another startling observation from the ship's resident captain. The others gawked. Even Chopper, this time. Zoro didn't look too shocked. He knew Luffy had come to the same conclusion he had when he said he wanted to see the swords. He knew Luffy acted like, and primarily was, a complete moron. But if there was one thing Luffy knew, it was his crew. Luffy, what do you mean? Usopp asked slowly. Other Zoro is Zoro, Luffy said, shrugging. But, different. By different, he means older, Zoro added. Other Zoro is an older version of me. That's impossible. Sanji shouted. You're right here. How can he be an older version of you? Other Zoro does have the same blood type as Zoro. I checked, Chopper said quietly. He tapped his nose. And they have the same scent. That doesn't answer my question, reindeer, Sanji snapped. We're on the Grand Line, Cook, Zoro said, crossing his arms. You have to be prepared for much stranger than running into an older version of your crewmate. I'm with Sanji on this, Nami shouted, making Sanji twirl in happiness. I can understand how him actually being you explains why you and he and the swords are all practically identical, but that doesn't explain how he got here. Are you suggesting he traveled in time or something? You said it, not me. Arg? I've read about this happening in fiction books, but not in real life, Vivi said. Still, I personally can't think of anything else that can explain how someone like him exists. If only we knew how he even got on this island. Let's ask, Luffy suggested. Luffy walked over to where the other Zoro lay, knelt down, and placed his palm on the double's chest. Zoro, wake up, and he did. Erity's eyebrow twitched. It was days like these that made her wonder why she worked with these people. Explain to me, she said, squeezing the bridge of her nose, how exactly you two got like this again. Yari and Runo glared down at her. Shut up and get us down. By get us down, they meant to free them from the giant and incredibly vicious Venus flytraps they had, mysteriously, gotten attacked by and caught in. That's right. Venus flytraps. Giant ones. Erity rolled her eyes. The whole picture before her would have been almost funny, if this hadn't happened 2 times already. So much for lethal New World bounty hunters. The boss said they had come highly recommended, so she didn't doubt their skills. It was their intelligence level that was going to cause issues. These two were complete buffoons. Take a picture, it'll last longer. Runo shouted as one of the flytraps attempted to bite down on him. Help us out here. Come on, Runo, she said in a whiny tone. You've gotten out of tighter spots than that. And this the 3rd time today. Flytraps are not air ducts and boxes. Help us or just die. Erity rolled her eyes again and grabbed one of the men's sabers from its sheath. She was no swordsman, and she knew those flytraps were stronger than any mere sword, but she could at least get them to let go. She didn't really even have to use the sword in reality, but at this point, she was fed up. She jumped forward and stabbed the blade into the flytrap's maws. The plants shrieked. Can plants shriek? And dropped there would be meals. Runo and Yari ran away as fast as they could, giving the men a chance to come in with flamethrowers, and Vaughn said bringing the flamethrowers would be self-indulgent. Ha! Yari and Runo stood next to Erity now, panting. The latter gave them a harsh glare. What? Yari asked. I'm ashamed to be seen with you, Erity replied, turning to walk away. Hey, don't blame us for that, Runo protested, walking quickly beside her. Yari and I are supposed the brains of this operation. You and the vamp are the muscle. Ironic, Erity thought. Given I once saw you toss the anchor like it was a baseball. Vaughn is not a vampire. I checked, Yari added. And as for my contribution to the argument, how are we supposed to know that Coward had such unusual ammunition? He was in the New World and a member of that crew, Erity huffed. You should have expected him to be strong despite also being a coward. And don't the two of you have Kenbunshoku haki? You should literally be able to see his attacks coming, or at least know where he is. We can hear his voice, but for whatever reason, we cannot pinpoint it. And knowing an attack is coming does not help if we are unable to avoid it, Yari replied simply. Even a novice knows that. Ooh, burn, Runo snickered. Erity rolled her eyes once again. Geez, if she kept this up, she'd be as dizzy as a dodo bird by the end of the day. Forget it. Have the men had any luck yet? Yari shook her head. None whatsoever. They have not found any trace of the boss's treasure. Oh, and 5 of them got eaten." She added that last part as something of a side note, causing Arati to nearly miss the fact she said it at all. "What do you mean, they got eaten?" Arati demanded. "They waded through the island's lake, and a sea king got them." What was a sea king doing in a lake? Who knows? Runo shrugged, his usual feral smile on. "We are on Kala. This is the kind of place that's supposed to drive you mad. Nothing makes sense here." Arati sighed and rubbed her temple. Maybe joining up on this venture hadn't been the best of ideas. If she had known how many headaches it was going to cause, she would have never agreed to it in the first place. No one would blame her if she quit now and went home. The others would be happy to have her back, but that wasn't an option. She was no quitter, not with stuff like this. Not to mention she wouldn't be able to take the disappointed, exasperated looks she would receive upon returning empty-handed. She also actually liked bounty hunting, and she got to do that with the boss's group. Turning in SBAG pirates' bounties was fun. Turning in bounties in general was fun. Not that she would turn in her queen's bounty, she wasn't that heartless. It was then Arati noticed they had arrived at the part of the forest where all those fruit trees were. It was perfect timing, too. She was famished and some fruit was exactly what she needed. As she approached a peach tree, she remembered how they found this place. It was after she and Vaughn had taken care of that weird kid, and Vaughn had to help finish off that moss-headed swordsman. Wait a second. Arati walked backward a few feet and looked down. There was blood on the grass and signs of a fight all around. But no body. Arati pursed her lips. This was where they left his body. She remembered it specifically because she recalled arguing with Vaughn about just leaving a high-bountied pirate behind when they could turn in his corpse later. Vaughn argued that his price would be dropped 30%, therefore not worth it. She didn't have anything against the swordsman, and actually would have preferred it if he didn't die. But money was money. One could never have too much of that. Anyway, the guy had taken 7 darts of tranquilizer, and she recalled Vaughn telling her just one of those darts held enough tranq to drop an elephant. There was no way he could have survived. But a dead body didn't just get up and walk away, so how? Pop. Arati looked up to find a very familiar sight indeed, and she immediately forgot about the missing body. She had other problems to deal with now. Seriously? Again? Location. Up a tree that is a relatively safe distance from the fruit glade, Kala? He pulled down his goggles, sighing. This was the 4th time those freaks had let themselves get caught by that same attack. It wouldn't be long before they began figuring out ways to get out of it. However, he would cross that bridge when he came to it, and would for now continue with his current plan. He grit his teeth. Dang it, why didn't the others listen to him? He knew coming to this island was a bad idea. The island was covered in fog and a current practically dragged their ship there. Didn't they learn about what happened whenever their crew came ashore islands with fog after their experiences on Thriller Bark? Did anyone listen to him? Did anyone ever listen to him? No, they didn't, because pretty much everyone else on the crew had a death wish. And then all this had happened. He didn't know where the others were, except maybe the few that freak with the feral grin had gotten a hold of, but he didn't like the blood on the ground in the glade. It could easily belong to any one of his crewmates. He had considered going after the ones that were kidnapped, but decided against it. The last time he went after something stolen alone didn't go so well. He was stronger now than he was back then, but he knew his limits. Storming the proverbial castle was a 2-man job, preferably if that second man was a member of the crew's monster trio. So he would watch, wait, and hinder their progress. These bounty hunters were searching for something on this island, and he wasn't about to let them have whatever they wanted. Location. Aboard the Going Merry, anchored in the water outside of Kala. Cause if you haven't figured out this is where they are by now you know. Time. I can't tell you much, the brat said with a shrug. Time does pretty much whatever it wants here. He raised an eyebrow. What is that supposed to mean? Tell you what, how about you figure it out and tell me later? Sound good to you, moss hair? The brat had disappeared into the trees before he could reprimand her for that comment. It wasn't long after that did he encounter one of the other visitors to the island. Okay, Mr. Tough Guy. How much pain can you handle? Pain remembers, you know. What does your pain remember? Wow, you are not even screaming. That is you got there. Talk about a psycho. Then someone else came. Their crew is of low priority right now. Let the trank stop his heart and let's go. We don't have time for him." Then darkness came. "Zoro, wake up." Zoro's good eyes snapped open at his captain's voice. His vision was blurred, but it was quickly clearing up. His shoulder ached and his head throbbed, but it wasn't so bad that he couldn't ignore it. He was lying on something soft, and a blanket was pulled over his body. So that meant he wasn't in the jungle anymore. Was he back on the sunny? He didn't remember anything after blacking out. Or more specifically, after that red-eyed freak hit him with trank darts. He scowled inwardly. He couldn't believe he let himself be brought down by something as pathetic as tranquilizer darts. If the cook ever learned about this, and chances were he already had, he'd never let him live it down. "Zoro," Luffy's voice broke in. He began poking Zoro's head. "Zoro, you awake?" His eyes opened. "Crappy captain." "He's awake," the cook's voice said, being ever so considerate by standing on Zoro's blind side. Not that it mattered. His vision was still a little swimmy, though. Why did the cook sound so uneasy? "Then how come he hasn't said anything?" Luffy asked. "He's just lying there." "I'm awake, Luffy," Zoro rasped, swatting the rubber boy's hand away. He immediately regretted talking, for his throat felt dry and nasty. He needed a drink of water, badly. He pushed himself into a sitting position, which immediately sent a flare of pain through his shoulder. The pain was minimal compared to what that witch had put him through earlier, but it was enough to make him clutch the afflicted shoulder. "Don't sit up," Chopper's voice shrieked. "You'll tear open your stitches." Zoro began to roll his eye, but stopped midway. This was Chopper's usual spiel, but it sounded different this time. Chopper sounded nervous, or even almost scared. The cook sounded uneasy, and Chopper sounded scared. What was wrong? What had happened that was making his crewmates act so strange? "I'm fine, Chopper," Zoro said in what he hoped was a reassuring tone. "You know I've had much worse than a sliced-up shoulder." He coughed. "Damn it. Can somebody get me some water or something?" A cup was thrust into his hands a minute later by who he assumed was Nami. Would his stupid vision just clear up already? He didn't need to be blind in both his eyes. Getting used to just having one eye was annoying enough. "So, Zoro," Luffy said, "how'd you end up in the mystery jungle?" "And unconscious, for that matter," Nami added. She too sounded strange, like she was talking to a stranger instead of her crewmate. Zoro took a sip and shrugged, and this time he ignored the pain it brought. "I was walking with Brook and he got lost. I ended up in the jungle, so I started looking for him, but then this creepy girl showed up and we fought." He scowled. "She didn't win. Some red-eyed freak showed up and knocked me out. I'll explain more later. Anyway, did anything happen before you guys brought me back to the sunny?" Cook, Nami, and Chopper are all acting weird. "What's the sunny?" someone asked. Zoro turned to give the speaker a look that asked if they were stupid. "You know, the Thousand Sunny? The name of our—" He froze. His vision had cleared up almost entirely by this point, and he was quite surprised to see the speaker was someone who should not have been there. Someone who he hadn't seen in over 2 years, and her duck. "Vivi? Karoo?" he asked, trying not to sound too incredulous. "What are you guys doing here?" Vivi hadn't changed a bit, and neither had Karoo, which Zoro found odd. His crew certainly looked a little different after 2 years, so wouldn't Vivi have changed in some way? She looked exactly the way she did when she said goodbye to the Straw Hats. Minus the princess get-up. She was even wearing that pink t-shirt with the black X's Nami had given her. Vivi crossed her arms. "I've been here for a while now. Mr. Bushido. More than 2 weeks, in fact." Karoo nodded in agreement. Zoro would have felt a little nostalgic at being called by his old nickname if the circumstances were different. What did Vivi mean she had been on the ship for almost 2 weeks? They were on Sabodi 2 weeks ago. "I think we all would have noticed you if you had been on board, Vivi," Zoro argued. "How did you get all the way out here? Last I checked, we left you in Alabasta after Luffy kicked that Sandcroc's ass, and we haven't seen you since." Vivi looked startled and, what would be a good word? Driven. Yeah, that was it. She looked driven. "Sandcroc? Do you mean crocodile?" "Do you know any other Sandcrocs?" Zoro deadpanned. "Sandcroc? She. That's funny." Luffy laughed. "Why do you call him that?" Zoro turned to remind Luffy that he was the one who came up with that nickname, but the words faded from his mind before he even said them. Luffy looked different. He was lankier, and, even though he was crouching, Zoro could tell he was a little shorter. As for Luffy's eyes, they were brighter. Brighter than they had been recent days anyway. Luffy was also wearing that old red vest of his instead of the cardigan he favored now, but it showed enough of Luffy's chest reveal something was missing. Luffy, Zoro said slowly, where's your scar? Luffy blinked, then pointed under his eye. You mean this one? Not the one under your eye, you moron. I was talking about the one on your chest. I don't have a scar on my chest. Yeah, you do. It's big, red, and shaped like an X. Scars like that don't just disappear, so where did yours go? Luffy frowned as his brow furrowed, and Zoro recognized it as Luffy's, I'm slightly confused and/or troubled, look. What was wrong with Luffy? Forgetting an old adversary's nickname was one thing, though how Luffy could ever forget anything about Crocodile was beyond him. Forgetting you had a scar and said scar being missing was another. Not to mention Vivi and Karoo were there when they definitely were not supposed to be. How in the world did they get on the Sunny? They hadn't been on the ship when they left Dock Island, they hadn't been on the ship when they left Fishman Island, and they definitely hadn't been on the ship when they left Saboti Archipelago. Anytime before that, no one had been on the ship. Zoro was getting a bad feeling about this. It was the same feeling he got either right before a fight, or right before he was in for the headache of the century. And why wasn't anyone else saying anything? Why were they all just standing there in the galley, acting out of character and… Wait a second. Zoro's eye scanned the room, and saw they were in a galley. Just not the Sunnies. No way, he said in an almost whisper. Luffy cocked his head. Zoro? Is there something wrong? This was impossible. There was no way he could be back in this galley. There was absolutely no conceivable way he could ever be back in this particular galley. Is he alright? Zoro heard Vivi whisper. He looks like he's seen a ghost. You got me. I've only ever seen Zoro look that freaked out once, he heard Usopp reply. Zoro kicked off his blankets and jumped to his feet, immediately earning cries of protest from Chopper. He noticed his swords were laying on the galley table. How many times had he eaten on that table? He even carved his initials into it when the cook wasn't looking, so he snatched them up, shoved them through his haramaki, rammed his way past his crew, and gripped the knob of the door leading outside. Hey, hold on, Chopper shouted fearfully, you shouldn't be moving so much. Watch who you're pushing, Mosshead, Sanji added. Zoro ignored them, pushed the door open, and ran out towards the deck. After which he immediately stopped, causing him to slide a little due to inertia. He took in his surroundings, trying not to look too freaked out, as Usopp put it. If anyone should have been freaked out in this situation, it should have been the Longnose. The sun waste deck in reds and golds. This deck had no soft grass. Only splintery planks were under his feet as he walked down the stairs to the main deck. The only source of greenery anywhere were Nami's tangerine trees. Robin's flower bed was not there, and neither was Usopp's garden. There was only one mast, and it was covered in metal plates from the time the captain ripped it off. The crow's nest looked painfully small compared to the observatory, and the helm was back in the galley instead of on deck. The figurehead was not a lion, sunflower, sun, whatever, but a cute smiling sheep's head. Even that looked like it was about to fall off, what with the plate around its neck from the time a whale knocked it clean off. It was a small, humble ship, and Zoro knew he wouldn't want it to look any other way. This didn't, however, change the fact that this ship wasn't supposed to be here. This ship was gone, dang it. It was gone, it was dead, he had watched it burn along with everyone else. Zoro took a deep breath and let it out through his nose. He was not going to lose control of his emotions over this. Recollecting himself, he walked over to the figurehead and gently rested his palm against it. Mary, he said softly. What are you doing here? What's Vivi doing here? Just what the hell is going on? That's what we should be asking. Zoro's eye widened. It was his voice that said that, but he hadn't been the one who said it. He turned around in time to see the speaker emerge from around the corner he had been watching from. That was when the day went from weird to just downright creepy. He recognized this young man's face, and that was because he saw it every day in the mirror. At least, he saw every day in the mirror back when he had both his eyes. Sorry I stepped out, the young man said. Nami made me. whispered something about not wanting you to freak. Zoro's eye trailed from the young man's face to his 3 swords. 2 of them were currently supposed to be strapped to his own hip, and they were. The third he had left behind on Thriller Bark. Yeah, bizarre, huh? The younger of the 2 asked. To put it mildly, Zoro scoffed. He ran his hand through his hair. Stupid Grand Line Islands. The rest of the crew must have decided now would be a good time to come after Zoro, because they all filed out of the galley and onto the deck. Now that they were in front of Zoro, he could see they too were different, just like Luffy had been. Nami's hair was shorter and she was wearing the old log pose instead the new one she got from Fishman Island. Curlicue's hair was parted back to the way it had been before their crew's separation, and he didn't have the new muscle mass he'd gained. And speaking of a lack of muscle mass, Usopp was back to looking like a toothpick in overalls. Chopper wasn't as lightly colored, and he was wearing his pink hat without the blue cap he now put over it. Vivi and Karoo, of course, were self-explanatory. Nami gasped, looking at their surroundings in bewilderment. Why the heck is the sun setting? It's only noon. Wow, that took longer than I thought it would, Luffy said, adjusting his hat. It felt like only a few minutes. It was a few minutes, Usopp hollered. The sun shouldn't be setting. It's just like all the ripe fruit, Vivi said to herself. It's like the seasons and the sun are out of sync with everything else. Hey, Mosshead! Sanji shouted at the younger of the 2 Mossheads. You could have told us this was happening. The sun setting 6 hours early would have been nice to know. The younger man ignored the cook, instead only focusing on Zoro. He crossed his arms, as if he were waiting for something. Zoro knit his eyebrows and also crossed his arms. What's your name? Roronoa Zoro, the younger man replied. You? Roronoa Zoro. How old are you? I'm 21. I'm going to take a wild guess and say you're 19. Good guess. Both Zoros stared at each other, and what was running through their minds was anyone's guess. They both pulled off the exact same poker face. The rest of the crew watched the exchange in silence, waiting for some kind reaction. The older Zoro felt his shoulder throb, and looked down to see bright red staining the bandages. Just as Chopper predicted, he'd torn open his stitches. You might want to get that looked at, the younger Zoro commented. Older Zoro clutched the wounded shoulder. I've had worse, it's fine. It's not fine, Chopper hollered, running over to the older swordsman. Get back in the galley right now so I can fix this. Older Zoro glanced down at the reindeer. Younger Zoro had a scary enough face as it is, but the fact the older Zoro was missing an eye made him look scarier. If you wouldn't mind, that is, Chopper stuttered, now looking ready to bolt. Younger Zoro noticed flash of emotion appear and disappear quickly over older Zoro's features. It was hurt. It hurt older Zoro that the young doctor was afraid of him. Younger Zoro thought that was a little out of character, but didn't comment. I don't mind, Chopper, older Zoro sighed at last. He began walking toward the galley. Let's just get this over with. Chopper nodded hesitantly and followed after him. Only the younger swordsman noticed when the elder swordsman made a quick glance at their captain before looking away. Once the elder swordsman and the reindeer were inside, said Captain turned to Sanji. Hey, Sanji, get started on dinner. I'm hungry and I bet other Zoro is too, Luffy commanded with a grin. Is your stomach all you can think about? Sanji shouted. What about the fact we currently have 2 Mossheads on the Mary? And what do you mean, dinner? It's lunchtime. But the sun is setting, Luffy replied. That means it'll be night soon, and that means dinner. As for Zoro, what's to think? Zoro is Zoro. There's just 2 of him now, and one of them's a little different. Sanji heaved an aggravated sigh. He never understood Luffy's logic, and he had a feeling he never would. Best just to do what he says, Sanji, Usopp said, patting the chef's back. I have feeling we're going to have one long night ahead of us, and eating a little food would be good place to start. I agree with Usopp, Vivi added. Some dinner might be a good icebreaker with the other Mr. Bushido. We can ask him how he got here while we eat. You're so practical, Vivi-Kwan, that's an excellent idea, Sanji praised joyfully. Only you could think of such a brilliant notion. Hey, Usopp protested. I'll get started on our dinner for lunch right away, Sanji continued. Yosh, dinner for lunch. Luffy cheered. The captain, cook, chef, princess, and duck all filed back into the galley. Younger Zoro remained on deck, a serious expression on his face. Nami remained as well. "Zoro, are you coming?" Nami asked quietly. She sighed. "I wouldn't blame you if you didn't want to come in. I can only imagine how I would feel if an older version of me showed up. It would bother me a little, I guess. And then there's all this stuff with the island and the sunset. Everything is so strange here, and I want to know what's happening." Younger Zoro didn't answer right away, and for a moment Nami thought that maybe he hadn't been paying attention. She was about to speak up and get his attention, but he beat her to it. "I'm not bothered by him personally," he sighed, rubbing his neck and turning to face the navigator. "What bothers me is what he might represent." Nami wasn't sure what the swordsman meant by that, but he didn't elaborate. He instead silently walked past her and started climbing up to the crow's nest. "See you later," he said. "Call me when dinner's ready." Nami frowned, but didn't try to stop him. She had a feeling he needed a little time to himself right now. Without another word, she went to join the others in the galley. If voiced aloud, the crew would undoubtedly unanimously decide this had to be the most awkward atmosphere they had ever been in. Sanji was at the stove, preparing their dinner for lunch. He was smoking while cooking, which he never really did unless his thoughts were elsewhere. Luffy hovered over his shoulder, trying to snatch bits of food, but the cook wasn't so distracted that he couldn't slap the rubber boy's hand away. Younger Zoro was still up in the crow's nest. Usopp, Nami, and Vivi were seated at the dining table, watching as Chopper finished putting fresh bandages on the older Zoro's shoulder. Actually, it would be more accurate to say they were just watching the older Zoro. No one was saying anything, not even Luffy. It was probably the quietest the ship had ever been, and this was what made the atmosphere so, well, awkward. No one seemed to have any idea as to what to say in a situation like this. If there was a pirate handbook, it most likely didn't dictate what to do if you either ended up on an island with no sense of time or if a future version of your swordsman showed up. It was not normal, but it did evoke a lot of similar thoughts from the crew. Vivi was thinking about what the older Mr. Bushido said about Crocodile. According to him, Luffy defeated the warlord and the crew left her in Alabasta. Did this mean she would succeed in convincing the rebel army to stand down? A person from the future would have knowledge of future events. The idea of the crew staying with her through this despite it not being their problem made her feel happy, though. Still. They just left her. She knew she wasn't going to stay with the crew forever, but that thought made her feel a little sick. Usopp was drawing circles on the table with his finger, thinking about the Going Merry. He had watched older Zoro's reaction upon stepping out onto the deck through the open door. The expression on his face. It was as if he couldn't believe he was standing on the ship. It was as Vivi said, older Zoro looked like he had seen a ghost. Just what happened to the Merry to make him look like that? And even before that, he'd said something about the crew bringing him back to the Sunny. What was the Sunny? Nami was trying not to think about older Zoro, actually. She was thinking about her log pose and the triple pose they found on the pink beach. Why did they just keep spinning? It was like when they first arrived in the Grand Line and her regular compass just kept spinning round and round. It did that because there were too many magnetic fields to lock onto. She doubted it was the same case here, so what was causing it? It was as if there was nothing for the pose to lock onto. Also, why hadn't it pointed at the island even before they came here? Islands didn't just appear from thin air, especially not islands where the sunset came 6 hours early. Sanji was trying to focus on making the crew's meal, and succeeding for the most part. The only problem was his thoughts kept leading back to the older Mosshead. Why was he blind in his left eye? The scar on his face looked old, so if this guy really was some sort of time traveler, would it happen the younger Mosshead soon? What if it happened while they were in Alabasta? The Mosshead was an idiot, so Sanji could see him losing an eye doing something stupid for the good of the crew. He didn't care about that sword-obsessed moron, but the idea didn't sit with him well. And then there was all that talk of Luffy not having a chest scar. Going off the description the older sword freak gave, the scar sounded nasty and painful. What would happen to Luffy? What would happen to their crew in general? Luffy. Was Luffy? He was too busy trying to get food from Sanji to really think about older Zoro. Besides, like he said, what was there to think? Zoro was Zoro. This older one shouldn't be that different, right? Chopper was also thinking about Zoro's eye. He was still the ship's doctor in the future, wasn't he? Why would he let something like this happen? Had he been unable to doing something as simple as save a crewmate's eye? Chopper had to admit. Their own swordsman scared him a little. The older swordsman scared him even more. However, a crewmate was a crewmate. Even if he was scary, he would help him if needed. Chopper sighed and tightened the last bandage. There, that should do it. I've replaced the stitches, so as long as you don't strain yourself further, they should hold. Older Zoro rotated his shoulder, then reached for his boots, which were still laying on his folded coat. Thanks, Chopper. You did a good job. Chopper blushed furiously under his fur and danced happily. Shut up, you jerk. Don't think you can butter me up like that, you idiot. Older Zoro smirked, but you could see the fondness in it. With his boots laced up onto his feet, the older swordsman stood up and put his coat back on, after which, he retied the bandana around his bicep and the red sash around his waist. His 3 swords were immediately tied into the sash as well. That black one is different than the one our Zoro has, Usopp found himself saying. What happened to the other one? It died, older Zoro replied simply, sitting back down. Oh, okay. So, Zoro as a 21-year-old was still as tight-lipped as ever. Usopp had a feeling the swordsman wouldn't go into detail even if he asked. Food's ready, Sanji announced, holding Luffy away with an extended leg. Someone go get Mosshead out of the crow's nest. Luffy left to do just that, since the sooner younger Zoro was there, the sooner he could eat. The galley once again fell into an uncomfortable silence. Older Zoro didn't appear to have any better ideas for a conversation than anyone else, so he too was staying quiet. Sanji began handing out plates, naturally giving Nami and Vivi theirs first, and it wasn't long before Luffy returned with the younger Zoro. Luffy ran to his seat and immediately began digging into the plate Sanji set before him, but younger Zoro paused for a moment, glancing at his older self. The 2 swordsmen made brief eye contact before the younger one tore his gaze away and took his seat. Soon everyone had their food, except Sanji, who was playing waiter, and they began to eat. The galley was still unnaturally quiet, save for the sounds of Luffy eating to his heart's content and the crew guarding their own food with their utensils. Older Zoro did a particularly impressive maneuver with his fork at one point to knock Luffy's hand away from his meat. Anyone could tell it was a move well practiced. Speaking of eating, older Zoro stopped and stared at his food quizzically. Something wrong, other Mosshead? Sanji asked, raising one curly eyebrow. Nothing, older Zoro replied. I just forgot how bad your food used to be. Say that again, sword freak, Sanji hollered, rearing back his leg to kick the elder swordsman. Sanji, we're eating. Nami scolded. Sorry, Nami SWAAAAAN. Besides, he said, used to be. That implies your food gets better, at least to him, right? I wouldn't say, better, older Zoro said, taking a sip of sake. Maybe, not as bad, but not, better. Sanji reared back his leg again, but another scolding from Nami put an end to that before it even started. So, the fact that you're referring to Sanji's food in the past tense means you really believe you're some kind of time traveler? Vivi asked as she tossed an apple to Kuru. The duck took it and went to go eat it in the corner. It's the only explanation that makes sense, older Zoro said with a shrug. I know if this were an illusion, the chances of us all dreaming is unlikely, and you can't all be shapeshifters. Still, as far as weirdness goes, time travel really takes the cake. And I've been through a lot of weird crap in the last few years. Ooh, Luffy said suddenly, food spraying from his mouth. What is it, Luffy? Younger Zoro asked. I have a question for other Zoro, Luffy announced. He turned his head toward the older swordsman. Why do you call crocodile, Sand Croc? It's a really funny nickname, Chopper asked. He was never answered when he asked it earlier. He's this evil guy Luffy needs to beat up in order to save Vivi's country, Usopp replied. Naturally I offered to do so first, but being the generous soul I am, I decided to let Luffy have the limelight this time. Wow, really? Chopper gasped. Older Zoro stared at the sniper with a tinge of annoyance, but ignored him and answered his young captain. You came up with it when you learned the guy ate the sand fruit, he explained. He took a bite of food. It's a devil fruit that allows him to turn into sand. Convenient, given he tried to take over a desert country. There's a devil fruit that can do that, Usopp asked. He could only imagine how hard it would be to attack sand. They have a devil fruit for just about everything, older Zoro replied. He frowned and muttered, never could stand logias. The elder swordsman sounded slightly bitter with that last sentence, but no one called him out on it, or asked what a logia was. Luffy was content with the answer, and Vivi tucked away that nugget of information for later. This led to another few minutes of quiet eating, and a few glances from both swordsmen. The older Zoro kept glancing at Luffy and occasionally his younger self, while the younger Zoro kept glancing at his older self. After a solid 5 minutes, Nami spoke up. Hey, Zoro? She said. Yeah? Both Zoros replied in unison. Nami's sweat dropped. Okay, that's going to be a problem. We can't call both of you Zoro, or things are going to get really confusing. We need to call one of you something different. Oh, I have the perfect names, Luffy said excitedly. We'll call them Zoro-chan and Zoro-osan. Who are calling Chan? Younger Zoro shouted. Who are you calling an old man? Older Zoro shouted. Don't worry, Captain. I have excellent names we can call them, Sanji said. He placed a hand on younger Zoro's head. Idiot Mosshead. He placed his other hand on older Zoro's head. Bigger idiot Mosshead. The Zoros knocked Sanji's hands away, both snarling, you want to die, swirls? Great, they're already on the same wavelength, Nami thought. She stood up and knocked both swordsmen on the head, since they had been about to draw their swords on the cook. Enough, I'll decide what we call you. Both Zoros fell to the ground, large bumps forming on their noggins. Chopper squealed that the older one was still injured, but it went unheard by a furious Nami. Nami is by far the strongest, Usopp whispered. Chopper nodded in fear. I agree. The two Zoros sat up, breaking through the pained stupor induced by their navigator. Kuina, you were dead wrong when you said girls don't become as strong as boys, younger Zoro thought, rubbing his head lump. There's no way she should be able to hit me that hard, older Zoro thought, standing back up and reclaiming his seat. She has got to have hockey. Now, Nami yelled. She pointed at younger Zoro, who was also back in his seat. We'll just keep calling you, Zoro. She pointed at older Zoro. As for you, we'll call you, Roronoa. Sound good to you? Zoro and the newly dubbed Roronoa both agreed. It was better than Sanji and Luffy's suggestions, anyway. Nami cleared her throat and sat back down. HMPH. As I was saying, Roronoa, you said you were 21, right? Roronoa nodded. That's right. So that means that if you really are a time traveler, then you're from 2 years in the future? Give or take a year. It really depends on where we are. Nami cocked her head. Just tell me the most recent thing that's happened to you all, Roronoa said, taking a draft from his tankard. Considering Vivi's here, it must be a long time ago, but I'm trying to figure out how far back I've gone exactly. Well, we left Drum Island 2 days ago, Vivi offered. Roronoa spit out his sake, after which he went into a coughing fit because some had managed to slide down the wrong pipe anyway. Luffy pounded his back and the cough subsided. Oh, I'm sorry, Vivi apologized. Are you alright? Was it something I said? No need to apologize to the bigger idiot Mosshead, Vivi dear, Sanji said, patting her shoulder. He's obviously so stupid that he doesn't know which pipe drinks are supposed to go down. Zoro and Roronoa gave the cook a scathing glare, the latter's looking even more intimidating with the missing eye. Sanji suddenly felt very uncomfortable and thankfully shut up. Instead of taking the cook's bait, Roronoa said, it wasn't you, Vivi. It's just that. You guys seriously left Drum only 2 days ago? Yeah, after being chased down the Drum Rockies by a homicidal witch doctor, Usopp said with a shiver. What about it? That's just brilliant, Roronoa muttered. I knew we were back in paradise, but this is just ridiculous. After all that effort to get to the new world, we're practically back where we started. The others are just going to love this. The new world? Nami echoed. Oh, right. I guess you guys never heard of it before. I've heard of it, Vivi spoke up. It's what they call the second half of the Grand Line. Most pirate crews die before they make it there, and those who do make it are said to be the best of the best. Sounds about right, Roronoa shrugged. The crew took a moment to let those words sink in. The best of the best, huh? Zoro said. He grinned. I like the sound of that. As do I, Usopp said proudly. Of course, with the great Captain Usopp on board, making it to the new world is the least we can do. Everyone rolled their eyes at Usopp's boast, except for Luffy and Chopper of course. Roronoa was once again giving the sniper an annoyed look. Annoyed. With a dash of something that was akin to a reprimand. Usopp felt compelled to ask the swordsman why he kept looking at him like that, but forced the urge down. We're the best, Chopper gasped. His eyes widened. Does that mean I found my cure for all diseases? Well, Roronoa began. Have we come across the All Blue yet? Sanji found himself asking. Sanji, Nami scolded. Sorry, Nami, it slipped out. You said Luffy defeated Crocodile? Vivi blurted out. Do I succeed in convincing the rebel army to stop the fighting? Vivi, Roronoa began again. Did we ever find Elbaf? Usopp asked. He gasped and leaned forward on the table. Has Luffy already become the Pirate King? If Roronoa was planning on answering any of their questions, he never got the chance to, for Luffy decided to interrupt. Stop it, Luffy hollered, slamming his hand against the table. No one ask him any more questions about the future, that's an order. Everyone felt deathly silent, shocked by their captain's sudden outburst. Except for Zoro, that is. He had a stoic expression on his face, as if waiting to see what Luffy was going to do next. His older self had a similar expression, only his looked more interested. Stop asking him stuff like that, Luffy said sternly. Got it, guys? We got it, Nami said slowly. But why are you so upset? He's upset because if I tell you about all our future adventures, it'll take the fun out of living them for yourselves. Everyone turned to look at the future swordsman, who was casually resting his chin in his hand. Roronoa gave Luffy a knowing smirk. That would be boring, and you don't want any boring adventures, now do you, Captain? You got that right, Luffy confirmed. I quit being a pirate before going on a boring journey. The older swordsman grinned, for that was the answer he had been expecting. That's what I thought. Roronoa straightened out and crossed his arms. Sorry, but if you guys want to know your futures, you'll just have to wait and live them out yourselves. Everyone looked a little sheepish. They supposed they got a little caught up in the moment there. While they were curious about their futures, and not just in the ways they mentioned, Luffy and Roronoa had a point. Sorry, Luffy, Usopp apologized. We got carried away. Yeah, me too. Chopper apologized as well. I'll wait for my all-purpose curoid, Luffy said with a serious nod. Now, bring me more meat. And thus returned the blunt, one-track-minded idiot for a captain they all knew and loved. Only Monkey D. Luffy could bring such a serious situation back to the topic of meat. Sanji knocked the rubber boy in the head. You've had enough already, what we have has to last us until Alabasta, you know. Stingy. Luffy grumbled. Sanji rolled his eyes and lit a cigarette. After taking a drag, he turned to Roronoa. Speaking of knowing the future, how come you didn't see this coming? Roronoa raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? The chef jerked a thumb at Zoro. Since you're Zoro from the future, then it stands to reason that you've already experienced all of this. Can you tell us anything about this island? I see where you're coming from, but your logic is flawed, Roronoa replied. I have no memory of ever meeting an older version of myself when I was 19, and I especially don't remember visiting this weird island after leaving Drum. That's impossible, Zoro said. I think I'd remember something like this happening. Maybe you're just stupid, Luffy offered sincerely. I don't want to hear that from you. It doesn't matter if it's impossible, Roronoa said. I remember that we never visited any islands after Drum, and didn't even touch dry land until we weighed anchor in Nanohana. Nanohana? Sanji asked. It's a city in Alabasta. It should be the first place we visit when we arrive there, Vivi clarified. We'll get back to the memory problem later. What I don't get is how future Mr. Bushido is even here on this island. She turned to Roronoa. You said your crew was in the New World, correct? Yeah, we were, the older swordsman replied. And we were in the first half of the Grand Line, Nami said. How can the same island exist in two different places? It doesn't make sense. Neither does having a 19-year-old version and a 21-year-old version of your swordsman in the same room, but here we are, Zoro pointed out. Exactly, I'm still trying to figure that out, on top the whole sunset at noon issue. Roronoa frowned at Nami's words. What was it that brat said? Time does whatever it wants here, he whispered to himself. Everyone heard it anyway. What does that mean? Usopp asked. I don't really know myself, Roronoa admitted. Remember when I said after one of my crewmates got himself lost, I went looking for him and had to duel some creepy witch? Well, right before that, I met this little brat who kept swinging around in the trees. And she said that on this island, time pretty much does whatever it wants. So there are people living here? Chopper gasped. I saw just the one kid, but she seemed to know enough about this place to be local. She left before I got any real answers though. If this kid knows something we don't, maybe we should try to find her, Zoro suggested. She might have the answers to why Roronoa is here or why the sunset is so freaky. Not to mention why all that fruit was ripe at the same time, Sanji added. I don't know this kid, but she's right about time doing what it wants. It's not following what standards we consider normal. Then it's settled. Luffy decided. We'll go out and find this mystery kid, then make her tell us about the mystery island. Luffy, it's dark out, Chopper pointed out. We'd never be able to find her in the jungle at night. Luffy crossed his arms. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yosh, then we'll find her at sunrise. Sounds like a plan, Luffy. Now, Mr. Bushido, can you tell us how you arrived at this island? Vivi asked the elder swordsman. It might help us get an idea as to what's going on. Roronoa scratched his head. Let's see. We left Dock Island the other day and were basically just following the pose. I remember being asleep. Of course you were, Sanji interrupted. Shut up. As I was saying, I remember being asleep until I heard Nami screeching at me to get up and help deflect cannonballs. Apparently, a ship of bounty hunters showed up and started firing at us. While we were trying to escape, the ship got caught in a current that was pulling us toward an island covered in fog. That's what happened to us, Luffy said. The Mary got caught in a mystery current and that's why we're here. Was your log pose not pointing at it either? Roronoa looked a little surprised by the question. Yeah. At least, that's what Nami was saying while yelling at us to pick up the pace. She kept shrieking that the island just appeared out of nowhere, and none of the log pose needles were pointing to it. Needles? Plural? Nami asked. We have to use a different log pose in the New World, he explained. I don't know the specific details, but the log pose has 3 needles to help navigate the many different islands there. Each needle points to a different island, I guess. Zoro, Usopp, and Nami remembered Luffy's idea about the triple pose earlier that day. He had been right? Hey, we found something like that on the beach today, Luffy remembered. I accidentally kicked it into Nami's head. Nami, show him. Nami reached into her pocket and pulled out the triple pose. Like Luffy said, we found it on the beach. I've been comparing it to my pose, and all the needles keep spinning. I've been trying to theorize why and it's almost as if. Roronoa didn't wait for her to finish. He snatched the triple pose, or rather the New World log pose, right out of her hands. Nami protested, but he ignored her, instead examining the pose that was now in his hands. Oi, bigger idiot mosshead, what was that for? Sanji shouted. Apologize to Nami, right now. Roronoa didn't apologize. He frowned and said, mostly to himself, she would never just drop this. She never lets it out of her sight. Who would never drop it? Vivi asked. Mr. Bushido, what's wrong? This New World log pose wasn't just any New World log pose. Roronoa could see that much. And he knew its owner wouldn't have left it lying on the beach unless something was very, very wrong. Roronoa stuffed the pose into his haramaki and stood up. Without so much as another word, he walked out of the galley, slamming the door behind him.